Today on Locked On Rockies, we look at the catcher position and ask the question, do the Rockies need to upgrade, and did they miss out on trading Elias Díaz?
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 10th day of October in the year 2023. I am your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. And if your team is the Colorado Rockies, well, guess what? You're in the right spot. That's what we do around here each and every day, is talk Rockies baseball and put it all in a nice little podcast for you on your favorite streaming services and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. You can find us there, and your subscription to the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel is the best way to help the show grow. It's also where you can be part of the show and fire off your Rockies hot takes. Let me know what you're thinking about the Colorado Rockies in the Locked On Rockies YouTube comment section, and I appreciate each and all of your support. Today on the show, we're going to talk about the catcher position. We're going to talk Elias Díaz. We're going to talk missing out on the trade deadline? Question mark. And the Dodgers are on the ropes, and not going to lie, that makes me happy as a jealous fan. We'll talk about all that coming up. Today's episode brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself. Purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's Jase medical.com. All right, folks. You can maybe take this as a review of the Rockies, but I think we'll dive deeper into individual performance more deeply as we go through the offseason. I'm not ready to call this the Elias Díaz player review pod or the Austin Wynns player review pod. I'm kind of more looking at the conceptual ideas of where the Rockies are at a catcher. Did Elias Díaz do enough last year to make you feel confident in him being your catcher next year? And did the Rockies miss out by not trading him, by not adding in Elias Díaz to the trade deadline, or the veterans moved at the trade deadline, especially coming off his all-star performance? Incredible. We'll just start there. Elias Díaz is responsible for one of the best moments of Rockies baseball in 2023. That home run, while it might not be a big deal for the rest of people, and while it will live in random sports trivia history for the rest of time, that was really fun. It was incredible to see live. It was incredible to see the reaction. It was incredible to see that in a game full of the best in baseball, and the biggest moment of the game was Elias Díaz. And that's why when I sit here and I think about should the Rockies upgrade, and I don't think that's the case. I don't think that, one, the free agent market's going to be great for a catcher, and what you might have to do to get a catcher, and bringing a catcher into your system is so hard. There's all of that mixes into it. But on top of that, Elias Díaz is, I think, a perfect veteran for this pitching staff, for this team, for this moment for the Rockies. He's someone that's going to go up and he competes and he gives you great at-bats, and he finishes with arguably one of his best, if not his best season of in a long time, if not ever, honestly. I mean, you might look at a game where he played half a season in Pittsburgh, but this is his first All-Star season. He's 32 years old. He's someone that came up in big moments for the Rockies and contributed. He's someone that he is not the best catcher in baseball. No. But for this era or for this current makeup of the Rockies, do they really need to go and fully invest and go big splash at catcher when you're hoping that in the wings that you have, you're a catcher of the future, your plan for catcher, or at least your hope for catcher, in former top 100 prospect here from Thomas Harding. A quick update on Drew Romo. As he is one of Thomas Harding's players poised for breakout, and this is from Thomas Harding's newsletter he sends out to emails. Romo struggled early at Hartford and lost his top 100 spot, but a late season surge allowed him to advance to AAA by season's end. Romo also changed his defensive setup with extensive use of a one-knee stance and should be comfortable with that by 24. With 2023 All-Star Elias Díaz under contract through 24, the Rockies can afford to let Romo show them when he is ready. This is a prime. Elias Díaz can play a prime role. He can play the exact same role he did this year, contribute in a positive way. When you look at Elias Díaz, when you're looking at him wins above replacement, 1.4, did have that 14 home runs. He did have a 72 RBI, 267 batting average, an OBP of 316, 409 slugging, and an OPS of 725. He's not knocking your socks off there with those numbers, but that's some good offensive numbers, especially from the catcher position. And on top of the fact that he was someone that could cut down a runner, he was someone that was going to go out there and get you caught stealing. At 22 caught stealing for Elias Díaz on the season, a career high in caught stealing here. Not high as percentage wise, but still someone who impacts on both sides of the ball and plays a solid game in a position that's really tough to get solid production. If Elias Díaz can recreate or get close to what he did this year, he's really a perfect fill-in for this Rockies team that needs a veteran backstop as they're going to go through a variety of pitchers and hopefully get some pitchers back that are comfortable with Díaz, mixed in with the fact that it should, instead of being Elias Díaz and Austin Wynns to end the season or to go through the second half and the majority of the season, it could be Díaz and Romo. I mean, that is a very big possibility for the Rockies there in the second half of the season, or maybe the last couple of months. Now, the Rockies might need to bring back, I can't remember what the contract situation for Austin Wynns is, but he can certainly fill the gap. He's not going to do anything crazy, and he's definitely not going to excite you, but he can at least fill the time until Romo is ready to come up. But I think right now, Elias Díaz can be someone that buys you the time until you get one of your big, your hopefully exciting catching prospect to come up and take over from there. So while he fits the bill, and while he's shown his ability to contribute, and if he can play like he did this season again next year, he is a benefit to this team. He's a positive WAR player. Not by much, but he is a positive WAR player. Did the Rockies miss out by not capitalizing on Díaz at his height, at his potential peak at the All-Star game, and not trade him alongside the other veterans that they moved on from? Let's dive into that coming up here in segment number 2. But before we do that, got to tell you about the title sponsor of today's episode, Jase Medical. Modern medical care and treatment are important, but our global supply chains are fragile. Things like pandemics, natural disasters, and foreign travel may cut you off from the treatment you need. Jase Medical is your solution. Just fill out their online form, and one of Jase Medical's board-certified physicians will review it to determine whether medications are safe and appropriate. Then Jase will send your prescription to one of their partner pharmacies, where your order will be filled and mailed directly to your home. You can also send your physician a message for answers to treatment-related questions at any time. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase Case. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast, for free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where I appreciate you making us your first listen of the day, and I appreciate your subscription to that YouTube channel, because not only are you helping the show grow, You can also be part of the show by leaving your comments and being part of our little YouTube comment section segments that we do here on the show. So appreciate it. Shout outs to all of y'all. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I really do appreciate my everydayers out there, especially as we're going through the off season together. So Elias Díaz fits the piece for the fits the mold for the Rockies in 2024, especially with him already being under contract and after seeing last year someone who can contribute positively to the Rockies and a team that again is going to be in a weird spot and a lot of questions remain. So to have stability behind the plate in the form of Elias Díaz, in the form of an incredibly likable veteran behind the plate as well in Elias Díaz, it's a solid move. And I at this point and over the stage of the Elias Díaz time with the Rockies, I'm not opposed to any of the contract and the extension. Again, he hasn't been dominant. He hasn't been, at some points it's been pretty tough, especially when you look at points in 2022. But when you have a season like this, when you go through the slog, it's key to have a guy like Elias Díaz. I think he's key for production. I think he's key to help out the constant rotating door that was the rotation. I think he's the right type of catcher to have to talk tough times and things with his pitching staff and that bullpen staff as they were going through the tough times. He just seems like the right veteran presence to have on the team. But the question is, did the Rockies miss out by not trading him at the trade deadline? And there's kind of an obvious answer in this. The obvious answer is yes. I mean, if you really think about it, the Rockies, who knows what they would have done? I mean, they obviously could have a variety of things. But yes, you can argue there, the Rockies keeping any veteran on contracts that weren't that long, weren't that expensive, or weren't part of the big picture, your McMahons, your Rogers, he certainly could have been traded, especially when you looked at performance, all-star game performance, all that stuff. So, yes, there's that element of it, but does that make it a mistake? Do you sit there and look at the Rockies trade deadline and focus on this being the shortcoming or the misstep? Or do you focus on the fact that the Rockies moved on from a bunch of players that probably weren't going to be part of the future, outside of maybe the bullpen? But even, I mean, that's probably played into a factor of the Rockies' understanding of what role those veterans were going to play. Can you sit there and say that the Rockies really made a mistake by not trading Elias Díaz when they moved from so many players? I mean, that was, again, the thing that is the most impressive about the trade deadline for the Rockies is just the sheer number of people they moved. Not huge flashy deals, but we can't sit here and say that Bill Schmidt has hesitated to make trades in his time with the Rockies, getting Nolan Jones and amongst other things on top of the big deal of going into this deadline and being sellers. Would they have sold? You could argue that the Rockies might have sold too much. The Rockies would have been in probably worse shape without Elias Díaz to finish this season because of what happened to the pitching staff. I think the reason you see Elias Díaz catch the most and make the most amount of appearances in games that he's made in his entire career is related to the fact that he was needed not only as a catcher but as a DH, as someone that could bring offense. He was needed off the bench late in games as a pinch hitter. So by keeping Elias Díaz, you were able to keep some stability and keep a key player in that impacts multiple aspects of the team. And you go into next year feeling confident that you can get decent to above average catcher play. And that might not be a big milestone, and that might not be very knock your socks off. I'm sorry. I mean, it's just the state of the Rockies. I feel better about the Rockies going into 24 with Elias Díaz behind the dish than if they did trade him. And then the question mark, would they be bringing Romo up too soon? Would they have to go and would they be turning to wins full time? This is a move that you can sit there and say, yeah, the Rockies should have fully blown. What would have really been the difference? Right? I mean, the Rockies lost 103 games. Would it really have mattered if they lost 108? Because they didn't have Elias Díaz in the second part of the season? I think it matters more because of the right veterans will have the right impact. And catcher is such a tricky position that for the Rockies to go through all of the issues that they went through at pitcher this year, and then to go through uncertainty, turmoil, and new faces, new catchers, new people behind the dish mixed in with that, I don't think would have been the right way to handle it. So all in all, the way I look at it, the way I look at Elias Díaz, his season last year, not being traded, I think he's more impactful for the Rockies on the team right now. And I think that's especially because what truly would have the haul for Elias Díaz been? It would have been the best it would have ever been. It would have been, another chance for the Rockies to bring more arms into the system, more potential pitchers, which is always a good thing. But I think Elias Díaz's impact on the Rockies is going to be greater as a player than as someone that was a trade piece or someone that was only here temporarily or someone that was only here filling in the gaps like some of those bullpen arms were. I think the Rockies, when they put their faith into someone, they really buy into him. And Elias Díaz did reward that last year with an all-star season and a really, really great Rockies moment in a season where there were not a lot of them and at a time where the Rockies desperately needed something good about him. So I don't think it was a mistake. I really don't. I think the Rockies moved on from enough of the veterans. I think the Rockies made enough moves and were able to bring in a good haul of players for what they had to trade, while hanging on to not only someone that's an enjoyable Rocky to watch and root for, but someone that I think is going to be beneficial in helping these pitchers, helping the pitchers. He was beneficial and huge in being a resource for the pitchers during the season and the Rockies in general. Again, Elias Díaz playing in 141 games this year. That's the highest he's ever played, 105 in 2022 and 106 in 2021. So the Rockies clearly, have shown that they believe highly in Elias Díaz. And I think with the current state of the Rockies, with all the other issues and the other things you need to figure out and address, keeping Elias Díaz and having that going through 2024 is a good idea. Because if he's solid again, the trade deadline opens up yet again. And it might be more impactful to trade him at that point when you're looking at a point and feeling more confident in going to Romo or wherever you might be in the middle of the season versus starting a new season with question marks at an important position. So that's what I think. So would it certainly wouldn't have been a bad move for the Rockies to move on from Elias Díaz. Absolutely. It wouldn't have made things any worse. But I have confidence and I have faith that it was the right move for him to finish the season and be with the Rockies. And I think he's going to be someone that will have an impact, not the biggest impact. He's not the most important key player, but he will have an impact for the Rockies in 2024. All right, let's talk a little playoff ball. Let's finish off the show by being a little jealous, but also being a little excited. We'll do that coming up here in segment number 3. And speaking of the playoffs, and speaking of getting excited, why don't you check out FanDuel and get in on all the October baseball? You can make your postseason debut with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Join FanDuel today and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to create your new account. Then you can get in on all the action from the first pitch until the final out. Bet on everything from strikeouts to home runs to who will win the game. And if you don't want to wait the whole game to get a W, predict what will happen in the next at-bat with quick bets. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now. Step up to the plate this postseason with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We're free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. Shout-outs to our everydayers out there, and for you, checking out the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel and being part of the show by leaving your comment and helping the show grow by subscribing. So we were talking Rockies, we were talking Elias Díaz, we were talking all that good stuff. Let's talk a little bit more of some good stuff. The Dodgers are on the ropes. And I want to start this by saying I'm incredibly jealous of the Diamondbacks. I'm hoping that the same type of fun and excitement and cool quick bounce back with really exciting rookies and exciting pitching will come to Coors Field and the Colorado Rockies. I'm not going to hold my breath in the same way. But this is a moment where it's kind of like, man, I hype them up too, and I talk about it, I call them the test. I call the Dodgers the test for the Rockies. But man, in October, it seems like a different, and they have the injuries, they got all that, yada 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 yada. But that team, they need to do more. They need to be more of an intimidating presence in the postseason. And yes, they've made trips to the World Series. Yes, they've gone deep. I get that. But for being the juggernaut that is the Dodgers, for being such a dominant force that is the Dodgers, it's so wild to me that there's so many times that they find themselves down in the postseason, underwhelming in the postseason. Now, they've come back. They've had big performances. They got depth. They got the lineup to do it. Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman are two of the best in the business. But it's going to be tough. And it could signal that potential tipping point. Yes, the Dodgers won the division. But if they keep sputtering out in the postseason, it weakens the allure. It weakens the dynamic. It weakens the threat of the Dodgers in the grand scheme of things. But it's so weird, and it's highlighted by why baseball playoffs in particular are so fascinating. Why teams? Because it's so long, so streaky, so many different things, and like we were saying yesterday, you can throw in the rest and the change in momentum and XYZ and all that stuff. But it just adds to the anomaly of postseason baseball when the Diamondbacks can roll into Dodger Stadium and take two. And the game was close, but again, the Diamondbacks jumping out early, jumping out ahead, showing off that tenacity. And that's what the Diamondbacks, man, that's what it's about. That's when it's paying off. I mean, everything that the Diamondbacks are doing right now, cherry on top. They're ahead of schedule. They made the right moves. They brought in a great closer. That's what gets things so energetic and pumped up about baseball. I mean, so much electricity, man. You listen to that crowd in Atlanta after that play yesterday. Oh man, playoff baseball crowds and that energy are just something else. And I just think that this could be a pivotal moment for the Dodgers here, because if they lose another playoff series, especially to the young upstart D-backs, what does that do for the conversation? What does that do for the NL West narrative in 2024? What does that mean for the Diamondbacks in the offseason? What does that mean for the Dodgers in the offseason? Maybe it won't mean much. Maybe it'll all be the same. Maybe the Dodgers run it back again, win 100 games, win the division as they usually do, have done, continue to do. But could this be a moment in which the Dodgers are no longer feared and looked at as the top dog? Still think we got a bit to go, even in this series. But the intimidation, the image, the big overlooking gloom picture, the dominant force that is the Dodgers, I think that look will take a hit. More so than it already has, because people, I think, have already been pretty critical of the Dodgers in the postseason. But I would like to just make the postseason a fraction of as much as the Dodgers and have any sort of consistency there. Because that's one thing they for sure always have over the Rockies. Playoff consistency. It's just so weird. Just so weird to see the Dodgers backs against the wall. It's so weird to see the Dodgers as the one in trouble. Because it feels like that's the way the Rockies are every time they play them. We'll see what happens. We'll see what the Diamondbacks are able to do. We'll see how the rest of the postseason looks here as we roll on through October. But folks, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Thank you so much for joining us and for checking us out here on your favorite streaming services and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. Really appreciate your subscription. It's the best way to help the show grow. Really appreciate those who are part of the show by commenting in the Locked On Rockies comments and checking us out on Twitter at LO Rockies. You can find me at Paul Holden 33. I'm your Rockies fan extraordinaire here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For your second listen of the day, why don't you go check out the Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Nuggets, or Locked On Buffs podcast, because lots to talk about in the world of Colorado sports right now. Folks, until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.